and this happened during the year, as you know, the economic conditions nationwide just kind of, they tanked. I mean, I think there isn't a technical fiscal term that we need to use here. Sales tax revenues are projected way below last year's levels, because each year normally there was a sense that they were increasing, and so not only did they not increase, but they actually decreased. And then property tax revenues and fees are projected below the budgeted levels, and there are a lot of reasons for that Meredith has talked about. Fewer transfers of properties, so there are fewer transfer fees, lower transient occupancy taxes being paid, et cetera.
Allison, can I stop you on that point too? And on our legislative program at the state level, is there a push, are we creating the push, or is anybody to get internet sales? You know, we are losing, in the state of California especially, from no sales tax on internet sales. I mean, it's getting to be a large item, and especially in rural areas where people do their Christmas shopping, for instance, over the internet. And is there a legislative push to get those taxable sales in line with every other sales?
Tom Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. I have not seen anything at this point, either at the state or federal level, that is moving forward, but this is early in the legislative process, so I'll check with our lobbyists in both the state and federal level.
Because we put it on our list several times. Is it something that Peterson and Sacramento is pushing for us, or is it just kind of going by the wayside? Because it's a huge issue, especially in rural counties.
That's correct. We just need to get a sponsor for that legislation.
We talk about raising taxes and fees. Let's get a little fairness in the taxes that we have.
That's correct. We'll do a follow-up for you on that.
Okay. And then the assessed valuation this year is 6.23%, which is lower than what we had anticipated. And then, as you heard, the state budget, and whether it's talking about deferring payments, no COLAs for clients, the Williamson Act subvention, which at this point is safe for this year, and then the fact that so much of the budget is dependent on ballot measures. All of that are challenges both for this year and next year. In terms of the second quarter report, the executive office is working with departments to stay within their budgets, and the projected shortfall is around 4.1 million. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And obviously our projection right now, if we're lucky, is a zero fund balance carryover to next year. If we're not lucky, it would be negative. So in looking at the components of that shortfall, and this information was kind of culled out of Jennifer's report, so it's a slightly different way of looking at it. The overall shortfall was estimated at 4.7 million. County general fund revenues below budget is around 1.7 million. The sheriff's office and jail overage is about 1.1 million. And HHSA of mental health, specifically program costs and audits, is around 1 million. The social services IHSS, this is specifically the loss of sales tax that pays for realignment, and that's 768,000. Planning and building was 411,000. What's kind of interesting here is to look at other departmental savings, and kind of what nets out of all of this is that we've saved nearly 389,000 throughout the rest of the county in terms of what other departments are doing. And then the contingency fund, this does assume that the contingency fund is applied to that shortfall, and so that's how you get that 4.1 million that you've seen several times now. And so just trying to have different ways of showing how we got it and that we're looking at it. Obviously, as we update, this is still based on projections, and so as we update, this could change.
Could you briefly comment on the mental health audits, just for the benefit of the public, describe that issue?
Well, I would briefly say that these are audits of previous fiscal years that predate the current administration, and essentially the state was billed for a certain amount. They come back and they say, no, this part of it we cannot pay, and then to the extent that you've relied on that in terms of you've spent the money and provided the services, that then becomes a debt or a hole in your budget. If
And
you
in-
want more detail, I will.
Well, and in rough numbers, I think it's approximately $500,000 for '02-03 and $500,000 for '03-04. And the '02-03, I think we're at a position where we're acknowledging we have to pay that amount. We're still working to try and reduce the number for '03-04.
Correct, and I would point out that the kind of setup under which those audits occurred continued on through '04-05 and '05-06. It did not change until 2006.
I might mention this, just a few years back, that the mental health service had actually over a $7 million debt at one time. We were carrying that. It got up to that here 5 or 6 years ago. So it's, yes, it's staggering, but it's considerably less than what it was.
Actually, there still is a mental health deficit. This is a current year issue.
And the $7 million is the cumulative debt of mental health to the general fund.
Correct, although we'll give more details on that in this afternoon's presentation. So any other questions on this? Kind of sobering.
The planning and building loss of permits, that's loss of permit revenue.
Yes, that's true. Well, no permits, no revenues,
Right.
but yes. I was trying to fit it on the page. Okay. So, when you look at this, the total shortfall for 2008-09, and clearly I want to repeat, this is projected, is 4.1 million, and the way that divides out at this point, we've been talking in terms of 2 million and 2 million, but as we've moved forward, it appears that it is more of 1.7 million or nearly 1.8 million for HHSA, of which the bulk of that is the mental health, and then the general fund would be about 2.4 million.
But the fact of the matter is, the HHSA budget actually falls into a general fund deficit if the state doesn't reimburse those dollars. It all comes back to the same.
Correct. If they spend money that they don't have, the default position is always county general fund money.
Exactly. So in effect, it's really a $4 million general fund debt.
Right, and that's why we're putting that. But I guess what I'd say is that you've got a particular effort in HHSA to address the shortfall within the agency, and some of that is quite appropriate. Some of it, particularly as we look at the mental health program in its entirety, it is a county-wide issue that needs to be addressed.
My point is, if the state doesn't reimburse the money, then it actually comes, it's a county obligation, it's a county general fund
Right.
debt.
Right, but the goal is to try and avoid that in the first place, to live within the state and federal revenues. Okay, so, cost savings sought. There's a hiring freeze in effect, and new hires are down about 75% since October 2008. The average used to be a minimum of about 20 per pay period. Then around December, it was about 10 per pay period. We're now down to 5, and as we leave the things that were already in the pipeline behind, it should dwindle down even further. We are reviewing extra help positions, and departments have been cutting back in that arena. Voluntary time off saved, and this figure is from July 1 to December 31st, was about 68,000. As we've entered into discussions around mandatory time off, voluntary time off doesn't have quite the same impact because it offsets whatever we negotiate in mandatory time off. We've saved money through the elimination of bottled water. We've reduced travel. Some of this at this point is hard to quantify exactly what the impact is. What we've got is whatever's happened through December, and then